I would like to elaborate on what I mean by secularism on the internet because the YouTube title isn't long enough for me to be more descriptive. What I mean is, social networks and various websites who choose to be guided by secular guidelines, and a valid choice this is. Not all websites choose secular guidelines. There are many that choose to have religious guidelines, and they're perfectly free to do so. I want to do absolutely nothing to interfere with that choice. What I'm worried about are religious entities seeking to interfere with websites and demand they adapt theocratic guidelines to accommodate their sensibilities. The most prominent example I could think of are websites that displayed cartoons of the Prophet Muhammad. Many of these websites were petitioned to change their rules and adopt guidelines to ban these cartoons. These websites, the most common ones that I know of, stood their ground and refused to adopt any new guidelines. Their decision was justified on these grounds. Muslims were offended about the image of their prophet being portrayed in any drawing. However, this is not the basis for an offensive image by non-Muslim standards. Let me give you a base comparison, one that is commonplace in the Western world. There are plenty of cartoons made of Jesus Christ all the time, parodying religion or making political statements. This is not considered offensive enough to be banned. Since this set a precedent that sacred images are not above parody, then the Prophet Muhammad cartoons are fair game regardless of how offensive Muslims find them. However, some Prophet Muhammad cartoons did cross the line in some places, and they were banned, but not because someone parodied a sacred image. An example of this would be, say, if someone drew an image of the Prophet Muhammad having hardcore sex. Websites that had rules about such imagery would ban such a cartoon, but not on the grounds that it was the Prophet Muhammad. The same image would have been banned regardless of who it was about. The Prophet Muhammad cartoons that were allowed to stay were judged on this basis. If the exact same cartoon were made of anyone else and was considered not in violation of submission guidelines, then the cartoon would be allowed to stay. Creating a parody, or even a childish provocative image, and simply calling it the Prophet Muhammad was not grounds for being banned. In 2011, the Council of Muslims attempted a proposal to the UN to create an international law banning the disrespect of religion. This was in response to the creation of Draw a Cartoon of the Prophet Muhammad Day. U.S. Foreign Secretary Hillary Clinton said if the council were so worried about the disrespecting of religion, they were invited to clean up the shit in their own backyards first, as Islamic nations are rife throughout with extremely offensive cartoons regarding Judaism. Anyone who thinks passing just one rule, banning the disrespecting of Islam, will bring peace is kidding themselves. Making such a rule would serve as a wedge for Islamic fundamentalists to make all kinds of demands in what must be banned, and it would be our own fault because we set a precedent in giving in to them. Muslims will explain very carefully there's a whole mess of things that offend Islam, and they'll all have to be banned as well. Islam's deeply offended by erotic imagery, it'll have to be banned. Islam's deeply offended by homosexuality, it will have to be banned. Islam is deeply offended by Jews, and they'll have to be banned. And they'll understand that we are allowed to dress the way that we like. But would it kill us to get Miss Hannah Minks to burqa it up a little instead of parading herself around like a whore? Oh, jeez. Dude, seriously, is this the YouTube you want to see in your future? Not cool, man. Not cool. And if enforcing these new rules causes us any hardship, Muslims don't care because they don't have any vested interest in our websites. So if enforcing these rules suddenly causes a heap of legal problems, loss of revenue, or other hardships, tough titty for us. They don't care. One of the problems that will likely crop up if we pass a law saying parodying Islam is illegal is a whole mess of other religions will come forward and demand the same respect. And they would be perfectly within their rights to do so, because how do you justify passing a law that favors censoring parodies of one religion but not another? You can't. So you either pass a grand sweeping law that will wind up being so oppressive it will be impossible to criticize religion, or you'll be dragged into an endless argument over what religions are most valid and what rules apply to them are the most fair. The simplest religious rule is no religious rule. All religions are equally fair game for parody and criticism. If this freedom will inevitably lead to a war between Islam and the West, then it's a war that simply will have to be fought. Because no matter where you stand on censorship, if you give in, sooner or later they will make demands you will refuse to meet and the fight will be on. I myself, I would rather be proudly burned as an infidel than live as a dhimmi.